to bring you Yogananda's Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam as explained by Paramahansa Yogananda and edited by Swami Kriyananda. I'm going to start by playing Swami Kriyananda reading the current quatrain, which is quatrain 64.
64. Said one, folks of a surly tapster tell, and daub his visage with the smoke of hell. They talk of some strict testing of us. Pish, he's a good fellow, and 'twill all be well. Paraphrase.
Yogananda's
Some
paraphrase.
people think of God as a surly disciplinarian, strict in his demands of us, exacting in his punishments, and prompt to revenge the slightest evidence of unbelief. A tyrant, in short, who tests people with suffering, judges their behavior with heartless scrutiny, and condemns them to eternal hell for being merely human. To the sincere seeker, opinions concerning the infinite are irrelevant. Can a person living in a room of mirrors see anything beyond its reflected images? Pish, says wisdom to the nonsense with which the ego, self-enclosed in spiritual ignorance, so often prattles of divine truths.
This is a very interesting quatrain because it describes our conundrum. As long as we are still enmeshed in the ego, and let's face it, we wouldn't be on this earth plane if we did not have something to work out with our egos. And so it sort of warns us not to take the critiques of skeptics and sort of take them on to ourselves and let any of it infect or impact our understanding of what God really is. I like to think of it as the ability to stand back as if like a telescope, looking, through the telescope at the vast panorama and realizing that life has a meaning, having the bird's eye view that has it all make sense. And for me, that came when I came upon the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. But it's not just him, it's the teachings of the East about the inner life, about karma and reincarnation. Then it all began to make sense. Let's face it, to have a little baby be born with some impairment that is with the child all through life, that person, it seems so unfair. They were just born after all, until we stand back and we see the cycles of time involved, and that we're all just here. These things are not punishments. They are simply tests to help us raise our energy above that ego, essentially, and come in touch with our own divinity, which resides within us. I remember watching the movie on the life of Padre Pio, a great Christian mystic in in Italy, and he was also a stigmatist. He received the wounds of Christ on a, fairly regular basis throughout his life. They bled and they were with him. And so Padre Pio was giving a talk, a sermon, I guess the Catholics call it. It was towards the end of his life, and he was dealing with the constant push and pull of the satanic force still within him, trying to get him to go in that direction, and him staying steady in his direction for God alone. And he was telling a story about a little girl who was sitting at the knee of her mother, looking up as the mother was doing needlepoint. And from where the little girl was looking up, she saw the back side of that needlework, and it just looked like a hodgepodge. It wasn't beautiful. It didn't make any sense to her. And then the mother lifted the child up on her lap where the child could see the needle point from up above, looking down, and she could see that it was stunningly beautiful. And that is the way it is for us. As long as we're living in ego and we're trying to make sense of this, and it doesn't make any sense because we're looking at things from the outside in rather than from the inside out, it's really not very pretty, is it? But as soon as we get in touch with the divine within us, and we step back and we learn to see, to have more of that bird's eye view of life, that divine view of life, then we begin to see the beauty of it. So often in life, things happen to us and we think they're coincidence. Well, someone I knew once said a coincidence is God choosing to remain anonymous. We think they're a coincidence, but in fact, that very big trauma that we just went through helped us on the other end of it. And it may not have been immediately, it may not have been the following month or even the following year, but at some point, our life takes the turns that it should. And then we look back and we see in perspective why that thing happened and how, in fact, it was actually helpful for us. And so that is the simple meaning, the brief version of the meaning that I took from this quatrain from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, as explained by Paramahansa Yogananda and edited by his direct disciple, Swami Kriyananda. Today, also, April 21st, is the commemoration of Swami Kriyananda's moksha. Yogananda said death would be his final sacrifice, and it was on this day 8 years ago that Swami Kriyananda left his body and experienced his freedom in God. Joy to you, and celebrate this with an extra special meditation today.